tripods, which a tripod is just like the tripod that you would see a camera sitting on, except it's much larger, and you can put someone on top of it, so a climber. And so we built 2 tripods and set them up one morning early in front of the EPA, and we covered the tripods with purple fabric that had giant messages. So the idea was to make these purple, majestic mountains, purple mountains, majesty. And, one of the mountains said, blowing up mountains poisons water. The other one said, blowing up mountains contaminates, or poisons people, contaminates water. And then between the 2 mountains, we hung a giant banner, like a very specific, long, sort of like message explaining exactly what we wanted. And I think the big surprise then was that, they came and they expected us to, like, come down at the end of the day, like, we're prepared to do, because that's typically what happens. They don't arrest us. It's 5 o'clock. We got the media that we wanted, so we're leaving. And to a certain degree, it has some effect, right? We're getting the media that we're seeking. But to, put that added pressure on the target and not just looking for the media, we decided let's just stay. Like, we're there. Why don't we just hold the space? And so that's what we did. Is we, everybody went home. And the next morning, all the workers are coming back, and you can't walk into the EPA without walking between the mountains and under the banner. And so the message was very clear. And then they saw the sort of determination the next morning, right? Wow, they spent the night out here, and these people are crazy. They really mean what they're saying, So I feel like that was, that's an example of some, like, bringing artists in, using their creativity, Don was talking about. And also, like, examining what have we been doing? How can we change? Now in DC, as most people are probably aware, the mayor has gotten arrested using civil disobedience. The city council, most of them have gotten arrested in a demand for statehood or representation for district residents. So that's another question for us. If like the city council is now using civil disobedience, and it should be said, that they have a certain level of privilege. Obviously, the council members, they certainly aren't fearing some of the social sort of job repercussions that some of us would. But still, I think it should be noted that it's like, well, then what does that mean for the rest of us? If this is now not seen as something that only a crazy environmentalist would do, it's like, our city council members are using civil disobedience. So I think that maybe opens the door for some other conversations as to, like, well, what are these radical demands that we're making, and how, what was that Frederick Douglass quote that we have on the back of the t-shirts? If power's not going to concede anything without a demand, then, how do we make those demands very clear, very loud, and what are those risks that we take?
Okay, I'm going to try to do 3 things in 5 minutes. One is I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ruckus's methodology, and then I'm going to tell you 2 stories. Okay, so how does Ruckus work? We engage in direct action, right? We're pretty famous for that. But we try to do it in a way that highlights local messages, local issues, that builds with local community. And we've learned over the years that in order to make that successful link, we actually need to invest in the communities that we're building, right? So it doesn't work for us to come in and parachute and do an action and then skip. That's not to say that big banner hangs, things like that aren't effective actions. Not what I'm saying, right? But we have to invest in communities, we have to build capacity in communities, we have to leave skills behind, and we have to follow up and support those communities when shit hits the fan, right? So that's a little bit about our methodology. I want to tell you 2 stories. So, how many of you went to the U.S. Social Forum in Detroit? Ooh, great. How many of you went to the Detroit Incinerator Action? All right. You guys like the crowd that slept in because you partied too hard the night before, huh? Awesome. Thank you guys, you're hardcore. So we teamed up with Zero Waste Detroit Coalition in Detroit. We started working on this action with folks 6 months before the social forum, right? To really kind of ask questions of them What does a powerful, successful direct action look like in your community? And to address issues of how do we talk to your folks about direct action? How do your folks talk about direct action? Alluding to what Dominic said about the culture where people of color are criminalized, right? And in places where our folks are going to jail over stupid things, right? And so how do you assess risk and, potentially going to jail or those things in communities where folks are criminalized? And going to jail is not an attractive thing. It's not an attractive thing for any of us, I think, but, So learning how to have those conversations with folks, right? How do we need to adjust our language? What do we need to know about the culture of the place that we're coming to, right? How do people want to be talked to and received, when we come into their communities? So the feedback that we got from folks was, we want to highlight the resilience of Detroit. We want people to know that we're still here and we're strong. And we think that the best way to do that is through art, is through song, is through movement, is through leaving things behind for people to hold on to. So we designed this action, that went right by the Detroit incinerator, that brought out the best of what we all had to offer. We had artists who came through and volunteered mad time and support to create these beautiful sunflowers. If any of y'all have seen the images of the incinerator action, you'll see this amazing art, right? The Detroit incinerator happens to be a block away from 2 schools, an elementary school and a middle school. We said, well, what about these young folks, that are having to breathe this stuff in every day? What's something that we can do to kind of highlight their struggle? These kids that are getting asthma and sick, and what about them, right? So we worked with the principals of these schools, and the elementary school said, yeah, we would love it if this march stopped here. And more than that, we would love it if you could leave something behind that the kids can remember. And so we did some planting. We got the kids from the school and from the neighborhood to come and plant things in the yard of their school, right? Something that they could look at and take care of and keep working at, and reminding them that people have their back, right? People from all over the U.S. were there supporting folks in Detroit. And then incorporating other tactics, right? Like some of our folks climbed up onto a warehouse next to the incinerator action, and next to the incinerator dropped a banner, right? Nobody had to get arrested, nobody had to climb or scale, but it was a very powerful moment for the residents of Detroit to see that, right? We're walking by the incinerator, right? This icon of nastiness, right? And to see, a banner kind of fling down, it was, very grassrootsy on a tarp, very kind of like, raggedy maybe, but some of the residents of the 48217 community, which is one of the most toxic communities in the United States, started crying when they saw it, because they knew that people are willing to step up and take that risk on their behalf, right? So that's, some of the learning that we try to build in along the way is, how do we as allies, when we're not from your community, how do we come in and take that risk on your behalf? But highlight your message and your struggle, so that it's not my face that the media sees, but it's your face, right? So that's the Detroit incinerator action. Since that, the Detroit incinerator actually got shut down for a few months. Woo! Unfortunately, the incinerator is now back up and running, but Zero Waste Coalition and residents and folks in Detroit have now been through a process where they designed and created an action, and they know what to do, right? So they have an idea of like, okay, well, this works, and it got us somewhere, and so now we know we need to do this, we need to start from here, and we need to build, right? So if they ever call us back in, or if they ever call any of y'all in, then we have a place to start, right? And we've left something there, some capacity and some skills for folks to get it done on their own and give us direction on how they want us to roll through in their community, right? So the second story I want to tell, you guys might notice I'm out of uniform. But I want to talk about SB 1070 in Arizona, right? Who's ever heard of SB 1070? Yeah. How many of y'all know that the governor of Georgia just signed a copycat SB 1070 bill? And this summer it is going to go down in Georgia just like it went down in Arizona. So y'all are close to Georgia, so make plans. July, okay? So SB 1070, right? Everybody knows we don't have to talk about how shitty that law is and how it criminalizes everybody that looks like me or even remotely like me in the state of Arizona, right? So what do folks do? Folks are mad organizing, mad mobilizing in the state of Arizona. They've got some really awesome, they call them barrio committees, right, where they're working in different neighborhoods, and folks are working and building with each other and developing strategies and, doing things to combat the state of hate in Arizona right now, right? So they called for a big march in May. We went and we rode through there and supported them, and they said, okay, well, you know, all these people are willing to come to bat for us, and this law is going to take effect in July. And, you know, we have to show the world, we have to show Sheriff Joe Arpaio that we're not going to stand for this. Right? So they called for a National Day of Action. So how that worked was they asked, you know, folks from all over the place to come in and support them, you know, but to really get behind the local folks. So we went to Arizona and some of the barrio committees to establish, okay, what's okay on the streets of Arizona on July 30th, 29th, you know, that will work in this place, right? And they also said, well, we know that Ruckus has a certain skill set and a certain capacity to do big things, right? Put big exclamation points on shit. And we want the world, we want the nation, we want everybody to know that we're not going to stand for this in Arizona. So on July 28th, these two right here, in addition to a couple of other people, climbed a crane and hung a big banner right in Arizona. That night, we were all getting ready for street mobilizations the next day, right? To see that banner hanging off of the crane, you know, I rolled by and I kind of watched them doing it, trying to pretend like I didn't know them. And then I went to a meeting where folks were getting ready for the next night, and you know, it was a huge moment of inspiration for folks to know that these guys were willing to put their lives on the line for them, right? So come July 30th, we said, okay, well, whatever it takes, we're going to show Joe Arpaio that he's not going to grandstand on SB 1070. You know, he was going to throw a big press conference and do this big inaugural raid, right, to say, you know, I'm Joe Arpaio, I'm the all-powerful one, and you guys can't stop me. So what did? We went and shut his jail down for the day. We stopped his raids from happening for a whole day by taking over the streets, right? And who was in the streets? It wasn't just privileged folks who have citizenship and status. It was undocumented people. It was people who have questionable status. There's a woman by the name of Susie Corona who is in Arizona. She has 5 kids, and her status isn't fully legalized yet. But she said, you know what? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to leave you guys in charge of my kids. And so she put, you know, a pot of folks in charge of her kids and said, I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to do this for my kids so that they can grow up here, you know, without fear. Because folks are watching their neighbors split overnight, right? Abandon their houses and move other places because of the fear of getting caught, right? In my own family, my cousin has to live across the border because her husband got deported for a traffic ticket, right? It's bullshit. We all know it, right? You know, so it was folks coming together and again, like learning from each other. How do we talk to each other and manage these things on the street, right? And being aware of, okay, well, you know, the news cameras are going to come talk to you. Who's the face that you want to see? You know, what is the story that you want to tell, you know, from those folks? You know, so that is a good example and a good moment for us about how, like, highlighting how, you know, there's how this range of tactics can come together in one place, right? So we had, you know, direct action climbing, which, you know, folks have to train hard for, but then we had folks throwing down on the streets too, right? You know, so it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, and we can build power in multiple ways, right? You know, so now we're looking at Georgia, SB 1070 copycat bill over there, right? And so now folks in Georgia can talk to folks in Arizona about, so how did you mobilize? How did you do that work on the streets? And then what are the lessons we can draw from? And more importantly, what do we want to say to our allies and folks that are coming in about how we want them to be here, the type of actions that we want folks to take?
I want to ask for your support. We are, you know, as you got a taste of from Sharon and a little bit from Cesar, all the stuff that we do currently on $200,000 a year. We just have the 2 of us on staff, and like I said, all this work primarily gets done by a mass of volunteers that put their blood, sweat, and tears into this work. And as you can imagine, most institutions don't really want to fund this kind of work, you know? It's hard to get funding from the powers that be that we're trying to take down. And granted, we will take that money and put it to good use. But it's hard to get it in the first place, and a lot of the communities that we support also don't have the funds to really throw down to the full cost or any of the cost that it really takes to put into this work. So the revolution will not be funded. It takes individuals like us and all of you to chip in whenever we can and sustain the work that makes all of this possible.